Hello students, welcome back to Daily Chronicles by Abhiram Iyer. So today let's discuss 5 important topics from the prelims perspective. So the 5 important topics have been selected are about the mangroves and also about the NEETI NCAR States Economic Forum portal, which is released by the Ministry of Finance, and also let's talk about the Bodh Gaya and let's see the issue related with it, and also let's talk about the India-Chile relations and also about the government securities. Chalo, let's start. So the first article have been selected from the PIB. Now what the article is telling is basically where the land meets the sea. Now it is associated with the mangroves. What are mangroves? Let's see. So basically the article is telling where the land meets the sea. Okay, that is the intertidal zones. Now, what are these mangroves? They are the unique coastal ecosystems which are found in both these tropical and subtropical regions, but where importantly to be noted is intertidal zones. What is this intertidal zones? Basically ocean meeting the land, which consists of high tides and also the low tides. Okay. Now, these mangroves, they are dense forest. You can see, right? Dense forest, which are both shrubs and herbs. Shrubs and trees. Okay, dense forest which consist of salt tolerant trees and shrubs, and they're adapted to the saline water and also intertidal fluctuations because of their long roots which holds them, and oxygen poor muddy soils also. They can even sustain in the oxygen poor muddy soils and also in the salt tolerant regions also, and mostly they are found in the high fall areas which ranges from 1000 to 3000 millimeters of rainfall, and also in temperatures around 26 degrees centigrade to 35 degrees centigrade. As we saw, they are adapted to the waterlogged soils, high salinity and also tidal surges. So basically the thing is they're having long roots which are extended very long to the ground. So they hold the trees very firmly. Okay, and that is why they're important for the coastal erosion also. They prevents the coastal erosion and prevents the floods also, storm surges and also floods. They protect us from floods. Now, next, let's see the key characterization of this mangroves. So basically the important characterization is that having viviparous germination. Now what does this viviparous reproduction means? So basically the seeds are germinated within the plant itself before falling into the land. Okay, before falling onto the land. That is called the live birth of trees. So viviparity reproduction, remember this. What is that? Basically seeds germinate within the tree itself before falling onto the land. And salt adaptation. Basically the excess amount of salt is released through the leaves or through the roots. Okay, they secrete excess amount of salt but they release it from leaves or roots. Okay, and now specialized roots like prop roots and emetophores will be prop roots and emetophores are the specialized roots where they are for stability and also for the oxygen absorption. Okay, now next, let's talk about the India's mangrove cover, which is reported in the India State of Forest Report 2023. Now the total mangrove cover is 4,991.68 square kilometers. Now not of remembering the statistics, but you have to remember the state-wise distribution. Okay, so total mangrove cover is 4,991.68 square kilometers, where it is 0.15 of the India's total geographical area. Now, if we see from the year 2013 to 2023, there is an increase of 363.68 square kilometers of mangroves, which is like 7.86% of increase. And coming to 2021 to 2023, there is an increase of 509.68 square kilometers, which is an 11.4% increase. Now, no need of remembering these statistics, but it is important to remember the state-wise distribution. So, West Bengal is having the largest mangrove resource, where 42.45% of this total mangrove cover is available in the West Bengal itself. Okay, considering for 100%, in this 100%, 42.45% of mangrove coverage is located in West Bengal itself. Why? Because West Bengal is having Sundarbans, which is the world's largest mangrove coverage area. And after West Bengal, it is Gujarat, and after Gujarat, it is Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and after Andaman and Nicobar Islands, our Andhra Pradesh comes in the next place. So first is West Bengal, Gujarat, remember West Bengal, Gujarat, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and Andhra Pradesh. Okay. Now further, let's see about the significance. Now, why these mangroves are significant? See, as they are the intertidal zones, in the coastal areas, they will be having fishes, plenty of fishes, and also wildlife, right? So they protect the wildlife, and it is good for the fishes, and also helps the local fisheries for catching of fishes. And also, okay, there are protection zones for the marine wildlife, and also they filter the sediments, protecting the coral reefs, and also their habitat for the birds, bees, snakes, and other terrestrial fauna. And coming to the significance for the people, they protect lives and properties from storm surges and flooding, as we recently saw this. And it also prevents from erosion, and it also stabilizes the coastal areas. Now further, let's see the key conservation strategies of Government of India. So basically in the year 2023, Government of India has brought MISTI. What is this MISTI scheme means? Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitat and Tangible Incomes. Now, why is the scheme? Basically for restoration of mangroves and also for the afforestation. Restoration and afforestation across 540 square kilometers in 9 states and also in the 4 union territories. And the next is the National Coastal Mission. Why it is introduced? Because for conservation of mangroves and also the coral reefs. So it is giving financial aid for 32 mangrove coverage areas and also 4 coral reef sites. And the next is the Green Climate Fund, enhancing the coastal resilience. What is this for? Basically, it is for the restoration target, which is 10,575 hectares of mangroves to be to be improved in the states of Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, and also in the state of Odisha. Okay, this is all about the mangroves. Now, let's talk about the NITI NCR States Economic Forum portal. So, basically, this is released by the Ministry of Finance. That is yesterday. And in collaboration with the NITI Aayog and also above the NCAR. Here NCAR stands for National Council of Applied Economic Research. Okay, let's see why it is significant and why this portal is important for us. So basically, this is a digital platform where it is offering a comprehensive state-wise data from the years of 1990 to 2023. Why? For transparency. As it is digital, it is transparent, right? To support the evidence-based policy making and research in all the 28 states of India. Okay, now it is developed by the NITI Aayog and also NCAR, which is the National Council of Applied Economic Research, but it is launched by the Ministry of Finance. Okay, now let's see what is the objective of this portal. So basically, it is giving some data, and it is giving the it acts like a centralized data hub for tracking the state level trends. Okay, like economic trends, and it is supporting the researchers and policymakers and academics in comparative analysis and also development planning. And it also promotes the data-driven policy discussions and also fiscal transparency. Now let's see what are the components associated with it. Basically, there are 4 key components associated with it. First is the state reports. Now, in the state reports, it covers all the 28 states of India and gives the structured around the demography, economic structure, socio-economic and fiscal indicators. And the second thing is data repository. Now, what is this? Basically, access to raw and categorized data under the 5 verticals. One is demography, and other is economic structure, physical health, and also education. Okay, I repeat this again. Remember this. So basically, the second component is data repository, where it is giving access to raw and categorized data under 5 verticals. One is the demography, economic structure, physical health, and also about the education in all the 28 states of India. And further, state physical and economic dashboard, where it is giving the key economic trends, and it is also providing graphs, summaries, and also downloadable data sets. and also research and commentary. So in-depth analysis and expert views on state finances and fiscal policies, which is supporting the long-term academic and policy research. Now further, if you see the key features and significance, basically it is providing 30 plus years of historical data for us, okay. And also benchmarking, it is a benchmarking tool for comparing the states and also the national averages, okay. Now it also bridges the data accessibility gaps for informed policy making, and also it is supporting the evidence-based reforms and public finance planning, and further it is encouraging the transparency and cooperative federalism. This is all about the portal, okay. Now further, let's talk about the Bodh Gaya. Why? Because basically there is a Bodh Gaya Temple Act. Now this Temple Act is telling that there will be 8 members in this committee, where 4 are Hindus and 4 will be Buddhist, but 1 chairperson, and this chairperson is a district magistrate, but this district magistrate is mostly the Hindu, right? So now what the Buddhists they're telling that Bodh Gaya is our sacred place, and how come the majority will be occupied by the stakeholders like Hindus, okay. Now they're telling we want most of the stakes, that is the issue there. Now, in this context, it is important to know about the Bodh Gaya for the prelims perspective. So, where it is located? Bodh Gaya is located in the Bihar state and on the banks of Niranjana river. This is important for the exam. Okay. Now, if you see the historical significance, it is one of the oldest surviving brick structure in India, where it is originally built by the Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE, and after that, it is restructured in the Gupta period. Okay, in 2002, it has been received the UNESCO status and declared the World Heritage Site. Now, as we also know that Bodh Gaya is one of the 4 most sacred sites in the Buddhism. What are the other places? First is Lumbini. Why is Lumbini significant? Because it is the birthplace of Buddha, right? And Sarnath, first sermon of Buddha is given in Sarnath, and Parinirvana has been done in Kushinara, and last is Bodh Gaya, where the entitlement of Buddha has been taken place, okay. So the 4 sacred sites of Buddhism are Lumbini, Sarnath, Kushinara, and also Bodh Gaya. Now, let's see the key developments related to the Bodh Gaya. So, if we see in the 3rd century BCE, Emperor Ashoka worshipped the Bodhi tree and built the Mahabodhi temple. And in the 7th century BCE, this Chinese traveler Huansang visited Bodh Gaya, called it a Buddhist site, as he found mostly the Buddhist relics there. And in 13th century CE, if we see the Bakhtiyar Khilji invaded and ended the Pala rule, leading to the Buddhism decline. And Bakhtiyar Khilji is also associated with the destroying the Nalanda and Vikramshila universities, right? Again, later in 1590 CE, during the Akbar's rule, a Hindu monk established the Bodh Gaya Mutt, shifting the temple control to the Hindus. And after the independence, that is in the year 1949, so Bihar Assembly passed the BTA, that is the Bodh Gaya Temple Act, with transferring the temple control to a new management committee. And now this new management committee consists of 8 members, 4 Hindus and 4 Buddhists, plus 1 chairperson. This chairperson is basically the district magistrate, who is mostly the Hindu. So here you can see Hindu majority is there. Now Buddhists are telling that no, we want the majority rule, as Bodh Gaya is their sacred place. Now the next article is about the India and Chile. Why it is in news? Basically, India-Chile eye deeper economic ties. The special focus is on the critical minerals. Okay. Now, so India and Chile are set to begin talks on comprehensive economic partnership agreement with a focus on critical minerals. And if we see Chile, Chile is very significant because it is home to the world's largest reserves of lithium and copper. Now, this lithium and copper, they are the critical minerals, okay, which are used for the electric vehicle batteries, right? So, in this context, let's see more. Let's know more. Now, what are the key developments? Basically, India and Chile to begin talks on comprehensive economic partnership agreement, that is CEPA, focusing on the critical minerals, and also Chile. Remember this, Chile holds the world's largest reserves of lithium and copper, which are essential for the electric vehicles, batteries, and also global critical mineral supply chain. And also further, now PM Narendra Modi and Chilean President Gabriel Boric Font announced the discussions in the New Delhi. And also Union Minister of Coal and Mines, that is G. Kishan Reddy, and also Chile's Minister of Mining, Aurora Williams, met to explore the bilateral partnership in the mining sector. So that India expressed interest in sharing expertise in the digital public infrastructure, renewable energy, railways, and also in the space sector. Now, further if we see, this Chile is India's 5th largest trading partner in South America region. Okay, Chile is located in the South America, so Chile is the India's 5th largest trading partner. Further, the bilateral trade grew from $1.5 billion in 2020 to $3.8 billion in the year 2024. Now, if we see the 2024 trade figures, India exports to Chile like around $1.2 billion from as automobiles and pharmaceuticals, and India imports from Chile like around $2.6 billion, mainly in copper ores, unrefined copper, and molybdenum ores. Now, remember, it is taking copper, but it is not taking lithium. So, maybe the CEPA agreement may accept the lithium reserves from the Chile. Let's see. Now, if we see the Chile's dominance in lithium, basically, it is the largest lithium reserves consisting of 36% of the world reserves. But it is the second largest producer, where 32% of the global lithium is produced from the Chile. So, it is the largest in lithium reserves and second in the, it is second largest producer of lithium. Okay, and also it is major contributor to the global trade, where 36% of the global lithium exports will be taken place from Chile, and it is located in the lithium triangle. What consists of lithium? What are the countries consist of in the lithium triangle? Basically, it is Argentina, Bolivia, and also Chile. This is the, if you can see clearly, this is the lithium triangle. Okay, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, A, B, C in the South America region. Now, let's see the global lithium producers. So, first is Australia, the largest producer, second is Chile, and third is China. And 5th place goes to India. Okay. So, first is Bolivia with 39. Okay. Next is Chile, Argentina, Australia, China, and India. Okay. First is Australia, Chile, China. And 5th place for India. Now, if we see the lithium reserves in India, so basically the Rezai district in Jammu and Kashmir have the significant discovery of this lithium reserves. And next is Cobra district in Chhattisgarh, and also Margala area in Mandya district of Karnataka, and Kodama region of Jharkhand. So basically in 4 states, Jammu and Kashmir, mostly found in Jammu and Kashmir, Chhattisgarh, Karnataka, and Jharkhand, and also in other places, Chhattisgarh, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Jharkhand, Arunachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, Jammu and Kashmir, etc. Okay, this is about the lithium. Now, let's see about the government securities. Now, why this is in news? Because RBI wants to buy 80,000 crore of government securities. Now, why it is doing that? Let's see. So basically, what are government securities? In the name itself, it is telling that something related to the government. Okay. So basically, they are the tradable debt instruments issued by the central and state governments to borrow the money. Okay. And this thing is also used as the finance physical deficit and also acknowledging the government's debt obligations. And see, as it is related to the government, they are the risk-free investments and also known as the gilt-edged securities. Now, 4 types of government securities are there: treasury bills, cash management bills, data G securities, and also state development loans. Let's learn about them one by one. So, first type is the treasury bills, that is T-bills. They are basically issued by the central government with maturities of 91 days, 182 days, and 364 days. Remember, 91 days, 182 days, and also 364 days. Basically, they are the zero coupon securities. They are the zero coupon securities which are issued at the discount but redeemed at the face value. Okay. And next is the cash management bills, introduced in 2010 to manage the temporary cash flow mismatches. This is similar to the T-bills, but the maturity date is less than 91 degrees. Here it is 91 days, but here it is, this cash management bills is less than, it is less than 91 days. Okay, next is the long-term securities. So, long-term securities, they are like fixed or floating coupon rate, which has the interest paid for every 6 months. Okay, and this tenure ranges from 5 years to 40 days. Here you can see it is 91 days, 182 days, 364 days. Here you can see it is less than 91 days, but as the name suggests, it is long-term securities where it is having tenure ranges from 5 years to till 40 years also. And next is state development loans, which is issued by the state governments to raise the funds, and it is auctioned like the central government bonds itself. Okay, these are the types of G securities. Now let's see why. Let's see how this government securities are issued. Basically, RBI conducts an open market operations to buy or sell this G securities. Basically, it is done under eKuber app, in the eKuber app. Okay. Now, why the RBI sells these G securities? To absorb the excess liquidity. So, see, when RBI is selling the securities, it is taking the money from the market, right? RBI is selling, that means it is taking money from the market. Why? To absorb the excess liquidity for controlling the inflation. And further, if RBI is buying the G securities, that means it is infusing money into the market. It infuses liquidity, which is stimulating and lending the economic growth. Now, what the article is telling basically? So, RBI is buying. Okay. Now, what it means if RBI is buying? So, basically when RBI is buying, it infuses liquidity which stimulates and lending the economic growth. Okay. Now, further, it is used alongside with the monetary policy tools like the repo rate, cash reserve ratio, and also the statutory liquidity ratio. And further, let's see, why does RBI buys this G securities? So, basically, it is buying means it is injecting liquidity into the banking system at the lower interest rates to encourage the borrowing and also investment. And further, it is supporting the economic growth during the slowdowns or crisis. And further, it is maintaining the financial market stability by managing the demand and also the supply of the money. This is why RBI is buying the G securities. This is important in the prelims perspective. Basically, these 2 points are very important. When RBI is selling the G securities, that means it is absorbing the excess liquidity from the market. But when it is when it is buying, it infuses the liquidity and it is stimulating the economic growth. Okay. So that's all for today. Thank you.